Long before anyone wrote a single word, humanity's greatest stories were already written across the night sky. Ancient peoples looked up and did not see a random scattering of lights. They saw a divine drama playing out overhead, a celestial stage where gods battled, heroes journeyed, and the very laws of life and death were explained. This video will completely change how you see the constellations, revealing the hidden myths and practical wisdom encoded in the stars by civilizations from across the globe. You will learn how these star maps guided entire societies, dictating when to plant crops, when to go to war, and how to understand their place in the universe. How did the Egyptians use the stars to predict the life-giving flood of the Nile? What terrifying omens did the Babylonians read in a passing comet? By the end, you will be able to look up at the familiar patterns of Orion or the Big Dipper and see them not just as stars, but as pages from an epic, global storybook. What story do you think the stars might be telling about our own world today? That shimmering band of light we call the Milky Way was not a mystery to the Egyptians. It was a map. They saw it as a direct reflection of their world, a heavenly Nile river flowing through the land of the gods. Just as the earthly Nile cut through the desert, bringing life with its annual flood, this celestial river flowed through the dark expanse, its waters made of starlight. And sailing upon this divine waterway were the souls of the pharaohs, traveling to their afterlife. This was not mere poetry. It was a fundamental truth that connected their daily existence to the cosmos. At the heart of this celestial drama was the constellation of Orion, which they knew as Sa, the soul of the god Osiris. Osiris was the god of the afterlife, of death and rebirth, and his story was written in the stars. Each year, Orion would vanish from the night sky for a period of about 70 days. To the Egyptians, this was the time when Osiris was dead, lying in his tomb. Then, just as mysteriously, he would reappear, reborn in the heavens. This cosmic cycle was not just a myth. It perfectly mirrored the most important event in their calendar, the flooding of the Nile. The river's flood brought rich, fertile silt that transformed the desert into farmland, a literal rebirth of the land itself. But how did they know when the flood was coming? Their most precise signal came from a single, brilliant star. Sirius, which they called Sopdet, was the most important star in their sky. For most of the year, it was invisible, lost in the glare of the sun. Then, one morning in early summer, it would suddenly reappear, rising just before the dawn. This event, known as the Heliacal Rising, was their New Year's alarm clock. The return of Sopdet heralded the imminent rise of the Nile's waters. The star's reappearance meant Osiris was stirring, and the life-giving flood was on its way. This direct, observable link between the heavens and the earth made the sky a divine, practical tool. It was a story of death and renewal that dictated their planting, their harvests, and their very understanding of cosmic order. While the Egyptians saw a cosmic river of life, the stargazers of Mesopotamia read the sky as a divine warning system. In the Fertile Crescent, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved their path, the Babylonians and Assyrians developed a form of astronomy far more ominous in its purpose. They meticulously tracked the movements of planets and stars, not just to mark the seasons, but to decode the intentions of their gods. Every unusual event in the heavens was a potential message, a celestial omen that could spell triumph or ruin for an entire kingdom. Their observations were so precise that they recorded them on thousands of clay tablets, creating the first systematic archives of the night sky. A sudden eclipse was not a mere shadow crossing the moon, it was a direct threat to the ruling king. The appearance of a comet with a long, fiery tail could be interpreted as an angry god sending a harbinger of war or plague. Even the slow, predictable dance of the planets held meaning. When Venus and Jupiter drew close together in a conjunction, it might signal a coming period of great prosperity or a critical political alliance. They saw their gods and mythical beasts in the constellations. The lion in the stars was not just a pattern, it was the actual representation of the great lion, a divine creature whose movements could influence events on Earth. This practice, known as celestial divination, was a high-stakes science. Priests known as Amon, you would spend nights on temple rooftops, watching and waiting. They had to interpret the signs correctly, as a misread omen could lead to disastrous advice for their ruler. This belief that the stars told stories of power and human destiny became the bedrock of Western astrology, a tradition that would eventually be passed on to the Greeks and shape our view of the cosmos for millennia. The Greeks took this celestial storytelling and wove it into an epic drama of gods and heroes. They inherited star patterns from earlier cultures, but infused them with their own vibrant myths, creating a cosmic theater that still plays out above us. Look at the constellation Orion, not as a hunter, but as the embodiment of a tragic tale. In Greek lore, Orion was a giant of such skill and pride that he boasted he could hunt every animal on Earth. The goddess Gaia, the Earth herself, sent a small but deadly scorpion to stop him. The scorpion's sting killed the mighty hunter, and the gods, acknowledging both their struggle, placed them in the sky as eternal rivals. This is why you never see Orion and Scorpius together. One sets as the other rises, forever locked in their celestial chase. Another story unfolds around the northern pole star. The constellations we call the Big and Little Dipper are actually Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Great and Little Bears. Their origin is a story of betrayal and protection. The nymph Callisto had sworn a vow of chastity to the goddess Artemis, but she caught the eye of Zeus. Their union produced a son, Arcas. In a fit of rage, the jealous goddess Hera transformed Callisto into a bear. Years later, her now-grown son Arcas, while hunting in the woods, came across the bear and raised his spear, not knowing it was his own mother. Zeus intervened at the last moment, preventing a tragedy by placing both mother and son safely in the sky. These were not just random stories, they were powerful moral lessons about pride, jealousy, and divine justice, etched into the very fabric of the night. But for some cultures, the stars held a meaning that was even more immediate and vital, guiding not just their morals, but their very survival across the vast, open ocean. The vast Pacific Ocean presented a challenge of almost unimaginable scale, yet the Polynesian voyagers crossed it with confidence, guided by a sky that was their living map. For them, the constellations were not static pictures of gods and monsters, but a dynamic compass of immense precision. They navigated by what they called star paths. The concept was brilliantly simple. They knew that every island sat directly beneath a specific star as it reached its highest point in the sky. To reach Tahiti, for instance, you would steer your canoe so that the star Sirius remained directly overhead. But a journey was never a straight line under a single guide. As the night progressed and the Earth turned, one guiding star would set and another would rise to take its place. The navigator was essentially following a celestial highway, hopping from one stellar landmark to the next across the dark ocean. This required a mental map of the entire heavens. They did not rely on a few familiar patterns like our Big Dipper. Instead, they memorized the precise rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, understanding how the entire celestial sphere rotated around the southern pole star, which they called Polaris. This knowledge was not written down. It was preserved through an unbroken chain of oral tradition, encoded into chants and stories passed from master navigator to apprentice. The legendary tales of the demigod Maui fishing up islands from the sea were not just entertaining myths, they were vital memory aids directly linked to the star clusters that pointed the way to those very lands. This was storytelling in its most practical and essential form. A single mistake in a chant could mean missing an island by hundreds of miles, a journey from which there was no return. Their relationship with the stars was one of profound intimacy and constant observation, a stark contrast to the grand stone observatories of other cultures. While the Maya built towering structures to mark the solstices, the Polynesians carried their entire observatory within their minds, using the sky not to predict the future, but to master the present and conquer the greatest wilderness on Earth. For the Maya, the sky was a vast ticking clock, and every celestial movement marked a moment in a grand, repeating cycle of creation and destruction. Their civilization was built on the belief that time itself was not a straight line but a sacred wheel, and the planets were the gods who turned it. No star was more important to their cosmic calculations than Venus, the brilliant morning and evening star. They saw it not as a single planet but as two different deities, one benevolent and one malevolent. When Venus appeared as the morning star, it was a time of war. Their sacred texts and codices show that rulers would often time their military campaigns to coincide with its first appearance in the dawn sky, believing its light granted them strength and divine favor. But when it shifted to the evening star, its influence turned treacherous, associated with chaos and misfortune. This was not superstition, it was a meticulously recorded science. They tracked Venus's 584-day cycle with such precision that their calculations are only off by a few hours over thousands of years. To make these observations, they built architectural marvels like the Caracol at Chichén Itzá. This strange spiral tower was not just a building, it was a giant stone telescope. Its narrow windows were perfectly aligned to frame the extreme northern and southern setting points of Venus, allowing priests to track its every movement with the naked eye. They also marked the sun's zenith passages, the 2 days each year when the sun passes directly overhead and casts no shadow, signaling the start of the rainy season and the time to plant maize. Their entire agricultural and political life was synchronized to this celestial rhythm. This profound connection between heaven and earth is captured in their great creation story, the Popol Vuh. The adventures of the hero twins who journeyed into the underworld to defeat the gods of death were seen as a celestial drama playing out in the night sky. The Milky Way, which they called the White Road, was sometimes viewed as the path these twins traveled, or as a great world tree connecting the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. Their observations were a form of spiritual maintenance, a way to ensure the sun would continue to rise and the cosmic cycle would not be broken. This deep need to find order in the stars was a global phenomenon, echoing even in the intricate animal symbols that ancient Chinese astronomers saw dancing across the heavens. Far from the Maya's world of cyclical time, the sky over ancient China was organized with the rigid structure of an imperial palace. Astronomers saw the heavens not as a wilderness of gods and monsters, but as a perfect celestial bureaucracy, a direct reflection of their own earthly government. At the center of this cosmic empire sat the North Star, which they called the Purple Forbidden Enclosure. This was the celestial emperor's throne room, the unmoving heart of the universe around which all other stars, his loyal officials and dutiful subjects, revolved. The constellations were not mythical beasts but ministries, palaces, and provinces. A bright star might be a general, while a dimmer one could be a low-ranking magistrate, each with its own role and responsibility in governing the cosmos. This belief created a powerful link between celestial events and human affairs. If a star suddenly flared in brilliance, it could mean a powerful new official was rising at court. If a planet wandered into the wrong constellation, it was seen as an imperial minister overstepping his authority, a portent of political turmoil on Earth. This system was so detailed that the entire sky was mapped onto the geography of China itself, creating a star chart of the empire. Yet within this strict celestial hierarchy, one of the most tender love stories in human history was written in the stars. Look up on a summer night and you will see Vega, the weaver girl, shining brightly. Not far away is Altair, the cowherd. According to the legend, these two lovers were separated by the Silver River, our Milky Way, and were permitted to meet only once a year on the 7th night of the 7th lunar month. On that night, a bridge of magpies forms across the celestial river, allowing them their brief reunion. This tale is the heart of the Kixi festival, a day celebrating love and devotion that persists to this day, showing how even the most rigid cosmic order could accommodate profound human emotion. But the Chinese court astronomers were also ruthless record keepers of celestial disruptions. They called unexpected starlights guest stars, which we now know were often supernovae. One such guest star appeared in the year 1054 and was so bright it was visible in the daytime for 23 days. They meticulously documented its position and fading light, leaving a record so precise that modern astronomers have identified it as the Crab Nebula supernova. A comet was not just a wandering star, it was a broom star seen as sweeping away the old order and heralding the fall of a dynasty or the birth of a new emperor. The sky was a living administrative document, constantly being updated with memos from the gods, and it was the astronomer's sacred duty to read and interpret every single one. This imperial, structured view of the cosmos stands in stark contrast to the deeply personal and ancient stories woven into the land and sky by the first peoples of Australia. Aboriginal Australians saw no separation between the earth beneath their feet and the cosmos above their heads. To them, the landscape and the night sky were 2 pages of the same sacred story, a continuous narrative known as the dreaming. This was not a religion or a set of beliefs from the past, but a living, eternal present where ancestral beings had shaped the world and then taken their place in the heavens. Every mountain, every waterhole, every river had a celestial counterpart. This created what are known as songlines, dreaming tracks that are both maps and epic poems, weaving across the continent and up into the stars. To navigate from one place to another, you would not consult a drawn chart. You would sing the song of the land and the sky that described the journey. The song itself was the map, and to sing it correctly was to never get lost. One of the most striking examples is the emu in the sky. Unlike Western constellations that connect bright stars into a picture, the emu is not made of stars at all. It is a colossal silhouette formed by the dark, dust-filled lanes that streak across the bright band of the Milky Way. From the right vantage point on Earth, this cosmic emu stretches overhead, its head, body, and legs clearly defined in the absence of light. And this celestial form is directly connected to the emus on the ground. When the emu in the sky appears in a certain orientation, it signals the time of year when real emus are laying their eggs, dictating the season for hunting and for holding the ceremonies that ensure a successful harvest. The story in the stars gave direct, practical instructions for survival. These narratives were far more than just myths or seasonal calendars. They were, in essence, the legal and constitutional documents of the oldest continuous culture on Earth. A songline encoded territorial boundaries, defining who had custodianship over which lands. It detailed the location of hidden water sources and edible plants. It laid down the moral laws and the consequences for breaking them. To know the stories of the sky was to know your identity, your responsibilities, and your place in a universe where every rock, every animal, and every star was alive and connected. This profound, holistic integration stands in stark contrast to the Greek vision of a celestial theater set apart from the human world. Here, the cosmos was not a distant stage for divine drama, but the very breath and bone of the country itself. High in the Andes, the Incan gaze found stories not in the glittering points of light, but in the emptiness between them. They looked upon the luminous river of the Milky Way and traced the silhouettes of sacred animals in its dark, dusty voids. Where others saw a mere absence of stars, they saw a celestial menagerie, a series of dark constellations. A great serpent slithered through the cosmic river, a toad crouched in the blackness, and a partridge-like tinamou bird took flight. But the most important of these dark forms was a mother llama followed by her baby. These were not just pictures in the sky, they were active participants in the balance of the world. The story went that this celestial llama would grow thirsty and descend to earth to drink from the oceans. Her drinking was what kept the seas from overflowing and flooding the entire world. This was a powerful cosmological explanation for the water cycle, but it was also a practical guide for survival. When the dark llama constellation appeared in a certain position in the night sky, it signaled the start of the dry season, a critical time for water conservation and management. This celestial narrative directly governed their engineering, inspiring the intricate systems of canals and aqueducts that channeled precious water to their terraced farms. Rituals and offerings were made to appease the celestial llama, ensuring she would continue her vital work. This profound insight, that meaning can be woven from the dark spaces just as much as from the light, finds a strange and violent echo on the other side of the world. Far to the north, the Norse people looked up and saw not a nurturing river, but a frozen bridge to the end of all things. For the Norse, the cosmos was not a serene order, but a fragile fortress besieged by chaos. Their entire universe was built around Yggdrasil, the immense world tree, whose roots and branches held the 9 realms together. The stars were not distant, cold lights, but brilliant sparks cast from the primordial fires of Muspelheim, the land of fire giants. Even the shimmering aurora borealis, the northern lights, was seen as something far more ominous and glorious than a simple atmospheric effect. It was the radiant armor of the Valkyries, the warrior maidens who chose the slain, their gleaming forms flashing across the night as they rode to gather heroes for the final battle. This was a sky charged with purpose and violence. Look at the 3 bright stars in a row that we call Orion's belt. The Norse people saw them not as part of a hunter, but as Frigg's distaff. A distaff was a simple, domestic tool used by women to hold wool for spinning. By placing this everyday object in the heavens, they connected the divine and the mundane, linking the work of the home and the wisdom of Odin's wife directly to the cosmic order. Yet this entire celestial structure was destined to fall. The most powerful story written in their sky was one of inevitable doom, known as Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. In this epic finale, the great wolf Skirl, who eternally chases the sun across the sky, would finally catch his prey. His brother Hati would devour the moon. The stars would be shaken from their places, plunging the world into an endless winter before it was consumed by fire and water. This was not a story of a cycle like the rebirth of Osiris. It was a linear, dramatic narrative of an ending, and every clear, starry night was a temporary reprieve from that ultimate fate. This imbued their stargazing with a profound sense of drama and urgency, a stark contrast to the peaceful, harmonious stories woven into the sky by the Navajo people of North America. In the stark beauty of the desert, the Navajo or Diné, people see a sky woven with the very principle of life itself, a concept known as Haja. This is not merely peace or beauty, but a profound state of balance and harmony that connects all things. Here, the stars are holy beings, direct participants in the ongoing work of creation and healing. The constellation we might call Scorpius is known to them as the first big one, a powerful spiritual entity that helped place the stars in the sky at the beginning of time. The sparkling cluster of the Pleiades is not seven sisters but rabbit tracks forever imprinted in the heavens. These are not distant pictures but active relatives, their stories and influences flowing directly into the world. This celestial order is made tangible in one of the most sacred healing practices, the Nightway ceremony. During this multi-day ritual, medicine men create intricate sand paintings on the floor of a hogan, meticulously crafting images of these constellations from naturally colored sands, pollen, and crushed flowers. A person who is ill, whether in body or spirit, is seated at the center of this temporary, sacred mosaic. The act is not one of simple decoration. It is a process of invoking the power of the star beings to restore Haja to the individual, to realign them with the universal harmony. Once the healing is complete, the painting is destroyed, its purpose fulfilled and its sacred power released. This seamless blend of the spiritual and the practical extends to the turning of the seasons. The position of certain stars tells the people when the first corn should be planted and when the harvest is ready, weaving the cycle of survival directly into the celestial tapestry. The sky is a living guide to maintaining order, a stark contrast to the relentless pursuit of empirical knowledge that would soon captivate scholars in a different desert half a world away. While the Norse saw a cosmos destined for destruction, a different vision was taking shape in the great cities of the Islamic world. Here, the night sky was not a theater of chaos, but a perfect manifestation of divine intellect, a grand design to be studied and understood. Across the vast Abbasid Caliphate, from Baghdad to Damascus, scholars became the new librarians of the heavens. They gathered dusty manuscripts from the Greeks, complex tables from India, and observational records from Persia, translating and synthesizing this ancient knowledge. This was not a rejection of faith, but an act of devotion, as the Quran itself encouraged the study of creation as a path to knowing the Creator. They saw in the orderly motion of the planets a reflection of a single, unified intelligence, and they were determined to map its logic with unprecedented precision. To do this, they built upon and revolutionized the tools of observation. They perfected the astrolabe, an intricate handheld computer of brass and wood that could tell time, calculate distances, and predict the positions of the stars. In grand observatories, they constructed massive quadrants and armillary spheres, allowing them to measure celestial movements with an accuracy that would not be surpassed for centuries. The legacy of their meticulous work is written in the very names we use for the stars today. That fiery red eye in Taurus is Aldebaran, from the Arabic for the follower, as it seems to chase the Pleiades cluster across the sky. The brilliant white Altair means the flying eagle, and Betelgeuse, the shoulder of the giant Orion, comes from Yad al-Jawza. These are not mere labels, they are fossilized stories and descriptions, preserving the Arabic interpretations of the constellations in our modern star charts. Their greatest achievement was perhaps the Book of Fixed Stars, a star catalogue that combined Ptolemy's ancient work with their own fresh observations, mapping the heavens in stunning detail and even noting the existence of the Andromeda Galaxy, a faint smudge they called the Little Cloud. This fusion of faith and reason, of preservation and innovation, created a new scientific chapter in humanity's celestial story. The precise data and refined instruments they developed would later travel into Europe, becoming the essential foundation for the astronomical revolution that would forever change our place in the universe. This universal need to track time gave rise to humanity's first great observatories, not as buildings of glass and steel, but as monumental stone computers. Consider the sheer scale of Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain. Its massive sarsen stones were not arranged at random, but formed a precise celestial template. At dawn on the summer solstice, the sun rises directly over the heel stone, its rays flooding into the center of the circle. This alignment was not a happy accident. It was a deliberate, breathtaking feat of engineering designed to catch one specific moment in the Earth's yearly journey around the sun. For the people who built it, this event was far more than a date on a calendar. It was a moment of cosmic power, a guarantee that the sun, which had been weakening through the winter, was returning to its full strength. It marked the start of the season of growth and abundance, dictating when to move livestock, when to hold great gatherings, and when to reaffirm their connection to the divine order. This story of death and rebirth was literally set in stone, a permanent reminder of the cosmos's reliable rhythm. The Maya achieved a similar feat with their pyramid at Chichen Itzá. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts a series of triangular shadows down the staircase of El Castillo, creating the stunning illusion of a feathered serpent slithering down from the heavens to the earth. This was architecture as theater, a public spectacle that reinforced the story of Kukulkan, the serpent god, returning to bless the land and signal the time for planting. The calendar was not an abstract concept, it was a physical experience, a story you could watch unfold in light and shadow. These structures were the beating heart of their societies, turning the abstract passage of time into a visible, communal event. They prove that our ancestors did not just observe the stars, they built their world in direct conversation with them, creating a sacred partnership between the earth and the sky that guided every aspect of existence. The sheer precision of the Great Pyramid of Giza defies simple explanation. Its base is almost a perfect square, aligned to the four cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15 of a degree. This was not achieved by chance, but by careful observation of the circumpolar stars, those that never set, revolving tightly around the celestial pole. By tracking their endless circles, ancient Egyptian architects could pinpoint true north with astonishing accuracy, but the celestial connections reach even deeper into the pyramid's core. Narrow, mysterious shafts snake their way from the central burial chambers out to the open air. The southern shafts from the king's chamber were not for ventilation. They were aimed directly at the heart of the Egyptian cosmos. One targeted the constellation of Orion, the soul of Osiris, while the other pointed squarely at Sirius, the star of Isis. This was a resurrection machine built of stone, designed to project the soul of the pharaoh directly into the celestial realm, joining the eternal cycle of the gods. The immense labor required to build such a structure, involving thousands of workers for generations, speaks to a civilization that staked its entire concept of eternity on the unwavering truth of the stars. This architectural genius, from the plains of Salisbury to the Giza Plateau, represents a fundamental shift in our relationship with the cosmos. We moved from simply watching the sky to physically capturing its movements here on Earth, a legacy that would soon demand more portable and precise tools for unlocking the heavens. To truly grasp the celestial narratives, our ancestors needed more than just their eyes. They built machines to read the sky. The journey begins with the simplest of tools, the gnomon. This was nothing more than a stick planted firmly in the ground, yet it acted as a fundamental timekeeper. By carefully observing the length and direction of its shadow throughout the day and across the seasons, one could mark the solar noon, track the sun's journey north and south, and even predict the solstices. It was a tool that made the invisible passage of time visible and tangible. From this humble beginning, the technology grew more complex. The Greeks developed the armillary sphere, a breathtakingly beautiful model of the universe made of interconnected metal rings. Each ring represented a key celestial circle, like the equator or the path of the sun. By turning this device, a teacher could demonstrate the dance of the heavens, making abstract concepts like planetary motion something a student could hold in their hands. It transformed the cosmic story from a distant myth into a physical, understandable system. But the pinnacle of this ancient ingenuity was discovered at the bottom of the sea. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck, remains one of history's most profound mysteries. This intricate bronze device, with its complex gear trains and dials, was an analog computer of staggering sophistication. You could turn a handle and it would predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets with remarkable accuracy. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses and even display the timing of the Olympic Games. This was not just a calculator, it was a mechanical storyteller, a device that physically enacted the celestial narratives the Greeks held so dear. The drive to understand the stories written in the stars was not merely philosophical. It was the very engine of technological progress, proving that our need to find meaning in the cosmos is as much a part of us as the stars themselves. This instinct to connect the stars is a fundamental part of being human. Our brains are hardwired to find faces in the clouds, animals in the rocks, and epic tales in the random scattering of stars above. This tendency is called pareidolia, the psychological impulse to impose meaningful patterns on random data. For our ancestors, this was not a party trick of the mind, it was a survival tool. By weaving the stars into a coherent narrative, they transformed a vast, chaotic, and often terrifying cosmos into a familiar and manageable place. The unpredictable fury of a thunderstorm was no longer a random act of nature. It was the anger of a sky god. The dependable return of the sun after a long winter was the triumph of a celestial hero. These stories provided a profound sense of order and control, taming the universe's mysteries by giving them a name and a reason. They served as the original comfort, a way to soothe the deep-seated anxiety of living in a world where so much was beyond human influence. Beyond offering comfort, these cosmic stories were the glue that held societies together. The legend of the hero twins in the Maya Popol Vuh was not just entertainment, it was a moral code teaching lessons about sacrifice, family loyalty, and the consequences of arrogance. The Greek myth of Callisto and Arcas placed in the sky reinforced societal structures and the power of the gods. By sharing a single sky story, an entire community could unite under a shared cosmic worldview, a common understanding of how the universe worked and what their place within it should be. These celestial narratives were humanity's first attempts at science, philosophy, and religion, all rolled into one. They were the frameworks upon which cultures built their identity. The profound shift came when these spoken stories met the permanence of writing. Suddenly, the fluid, local tales of the stars could be solidified, standardized, and spread across continents. The oral traditions of the Polynesians, passed down through chants, became the precise clay tablet records of the Babylonians. The celestial bureaucracy of the Chinese court could be meticulously documented and referenced by future generations. Writing did not kill the celestial story. It gave it a longer, more influential life, allowing these ancient human responses to the cosmos to be preserved, compared, and built upon, eventually leading to the science of astronomy we know today. These celestial stories lived and breathed in the human voice long before they were ever carved in stone or written on a page. Across countless generations, the most sophisticated maps of the sky were not drawn on parchment, but woven into the very fabric of song and story. The Polynesian navigator, alone on the vast, dark ocean, did not consult a chart. He recited a chant. These chants were his star compass, a rhythmic sequence that named the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, one after another, creating an audible pathway across the sea. The chant itself was the map, and to sing it correctly was to stay on course. A single missed verse or a forgotten star name could mean drifting into oblivion. This knowledge was not a static set of data to be looked up. It was a living, breathing skill passed directly from a master to his apprentice, a sacred trust that tied the knowledge inextricably to the person who held it and the community it served. This same principle echoed in the deserts of Australia, where Aboriginal elders maintained the songlines. These were not mere songs, but epic sagas that simultaneously described the landscape, the ancestral beings, and their celestial counterparts. To sing the song of the emu was to know the location of waterholes, to understand the breeding cycles of the animal, and to see its dark silhouette in the Milky Way overhead. The repetitive, rhythmic structure of these oral forms was not an artistic choice. It was a mnemonic technology. Rhythm and rhyme act as cognitive hooks, making vast amounts of complex, practical information easier to memorize and far harder to forget. This ensured the survival of entire worldviews for thousands of years, keeping the celestial stories alive and immediately relevant to daily life. The arrival of writing would eventually freeze these fluid narratives, preserving them with a new kind of permanence, but also separating the knowledge from the living voice of the storyteller. The human voice could carry a story across generations, but clay and papyrus gave it a form that could travel across empires. With the invention of writing, the intimate, fluid stories of the stars were frozen in time, transformed from a living chant into a permanent record. The Babylonians were masters of this new technology, pressing wedge-shaped marks into soft clay to log the precise movements of Venus. These cuneiform tablets were not poems or myths. They were data logs, meticulously tracking the planet's appearances and disappearances as omens for the king's court. They turned the unpredictable dance of the gods into a predictable pattern that could be filed away and referenced years later. In Egypt, this permanence served a different, deeply spiritual purpose. Inside the tombs of nobles, the lids of coffins were painted with intricate star clocks. These were not timekeepers for the living, but detailed maps for the soul of the deceased, a graphical guide to navigate the perilous, star-lit river of the afterlife and secure a place among the circumpolar stars, the undying ones. Writing was becoming a bridge between the mortal world and the eternal heavens. Then came a work that would fuse poetry with precision, popularizing the Greek sky for centuries. The poet Aratus did not make new observations. He took the existing knowledge of the constellations and wove it into a single, breathtaking epic called the Phenomena. His verses described the rising and setting of star groups with such clarity that a farmer or a sailor could step outside and use his poem as a practical guide to the night. He packaged the entire celestial drama in beautiful, memorable language, ensuring these stories would be copied and recited long after the original astronomers were forgotten. But the greatest leap came from Claudius Ptolemy. His monumental text, the Almagest, was something entirely new. It was not a collection of stories or omens. It was a rigorous mathematical system. Ptolemy proposed a universe with the Earth at its center, and using complex geometry and centuries of data, he created a model that could predict planetary positions with stunning accuracy for its time. His work represented a fundamental split, a fork in the road of human understanding. On one path lay the myth of Orion the hunter, a story of pride and a scorpion's sting. On the other path lay a set of coordinates and equations for the same stars. the scientific observation of the cosmos was beginning to pull away from the mythological narrative that had given it meaning for millennia. This written legacy, from the omen tablets of Babylon to the geometric models of Greece, became a shared treasure. It was a foundation of knowledge that could be copied, criticized, and built upon by scholars in Baghdad, India, and eventually Renaissance Europe, igniting a global conversation that would forever alter our place in the stars. This celestial conversation was not confined by borders or language. As merchants and monks traversed the sprawling network of the Silk Road, they carried more than just silk and spices in their saddlebags. They transported entire cosmologies, sharing stories under the very same stars that guided their journeys. The Greek vision of Orion the hunter traveled east, while the intricate star maps of the Chinese imperial court fascinated scholars in the west. Indian astronomers brought their system of 28 lunar mansions, a zodiac based on the moon's path, which would profoundly influence the developing science of Islamic astronomy. This was a monumental fusion of human thought, a meeting of minds under the open skies of Central Asia, where one traveler's constellation became another's celestial official. Perhaps the most striking example of this syncretism is the story of Mount Meru. In Buddhist and Hindu tradition, Mount Meru is the cosmic axis of the universe, a golden mountain that supports the heavens and is encircled by the sun, moon, and stars. This powerful image was so compelling that it was adopted and adapted by cultures all along the trade routes, finding a place in the cosmologies of Central Asian peoples and even influencing Tibetan Buddhist maps of the universe. Imagine a caravan camped for the night in the Taklamakan Desert. A Greek scholar might point to the Big Dipper, telling the tale of Callisto transformed into a bear. A Chinese merchant would counter, explaining how those same stars formed the chariot of the celestial emperor. They were not arguing over who was right, but enriching each other's understanding, adding new chapters to an ancient global storybook written in the stars. This historical interconnectedness reveals a profound truth. For millennia, our stories were different, but our sky was shared. This unified human experience of a personally meaningful cosmos, however, was about to face its greatest challenge. A new way of seeing the universe was emerging, one that would separate the story from the science and forever change our relationship with the night. The celestial clockwork built by Ptolemy and refined for over 1,000 years was shattered by a single, radical idea. Nicolaus Copernicus proposed a sun-centered universe, and in that moment the cosmic stage collapsed. The planets were no longer wandering gods with personal agendas. They were physical worlds, moving in vast, elliptical orbits governed by the simple, unfeeling laws of gravity and motion. The celestial sphere, that great dome painted with constellations, was revealed as an illusion. In its place was an infinite, dark void with stars scattered at unimaginable distances. This was not just a scientific correction, it was a profound existential shock. The Earth was demoted from the center of God's creation to just another rock spinning in the void. The stories that had given the sky its meaning for millennia were suddenly homeless. Orion was no longer a hunter, he was just a random collection of gas giants and nuclear furnaces, his narrative stripped away by cold, hard math. This forced a painful but necessary divorce between scientific truth and cultural story. The sky could no longer be read as a literal map of divine will or a celestial bureaucracy. Yet the stories did not simply vanish, they migrated. They retreated from the realm of objective cosmology and took root in the fertile ground of human culture. The myths of Hercules and Perseus became the subjects of breathtaking Renaissance paintings and epic poems. The zodiac, stripped of its predictive power over human fate, found a new life as a language of psychology and personality. The power of these narratives to shape our art, to explore our inner lives, and to inspire awe was not diminished, it was simply relocated. We gained a universe of breathtaking scale and precision, but we lost the intimate, personal connection to a sky that was alive with meaning. We exchanged a cosmos that spoke to us for one that simply is. This is the great trade-off of the modern age, a silent question that hangs over every starry night. What have we truly lost by banishing the stories from the heavens? That profound sense of loss echoes in the orange glow that now dominates our night. For the first time in human history, a majority of people live under skies where the Milky Way is invisible, washed away by the relentless tide of electric light. This light pollution is far more than an inconvenience for astronomers. It is a cultural amnesia. We have physically severed the tether that connected every human generation before us to the cosmos. The awe that guided Polynesian voyagers and inspired Mayan pyramid builders is now a rare experience, accessible only in remote sanctuaries or the artificial dome of a planetarium. The celestial stories that were once a living, breathing part of daily life have been exiled, transformed from a shared reality into academic subjects. We read about the emu in the sky in a book, but we can no longer step outside and see its dark silhouette stretching overhead. This disconnection runs deeper than nostalgia. Our internal clocks, evolved over millennia to sync with the rhythms of sunlight and starlight, are now constantly confused by the perpetual artificial day we have created. The natural cue that told our ancestors it was time to rest, to reflect, or to begin a celebration is gone, replaced by the flat, constant hum of a street lamp. This is why the fight to preserve dark sky places is so critical. It is not just about protecting the view, it is about safeguarding a fundamental human experience, a wellspring of inspiration and humility. The movement to revive indigenous star knowledge is equally vital, as it returns the living voice to the celestial stories, reconnecting the patterns in the sky with the wisdom of the land. In a beautiful twist, this very act of preservation is now aiding modern science. The same dark skies that allowed ancient cultures to see the gods and animals in the stars now allow our most powerful telescopes to peer to the edge of the observable universe, searching for answers to questions our ancestors could never have dreamed to ask. The silent stones of ancient temples are finally beginning to speak, their celestial secrets decoded by a new science. Archaeoastronomy bridges the gap between myth and measurement, using satellite imagery and three-dimensional computer modeling to prove what was once dismissed as legend. Researchers can now simulate the sky over Machu Picchu as it appeared 6 centuries ago, revealing how the Intihuatana stone, the hitching post of the sun, precisely marks the equinoxes. At Stonehenge, advanced surveys confirm that the monument's alignment captures not only the summer solstice sunrise, but also the extreme rising and setting points of the moon over its 18.6-year cycle. This is not wild speculation, it is verifiable data that confirms the astronomical genius of our ancestors. Alongside this technological rediscovery runs a powerful cultural revival. For decades, the art of Polynesian wayfinding was nearly extinct, a casualty of colonization and modern navigation. Then, in the 1970s, a movement began to reclaim this sacred knowledge. The result was the Hokulea, a double-hulled voyaging canoe built using ancient designs. In 1976, without a single compass or chart, navigator Mau Piailug guided the Hokulea on a 2,500-mile journey from Hawaii to Tahiti, using only the stars, the swells, and the flight of birds. His success was more than a feat of endurance. It was a triumphant declaration that this star knowledge was not obsolete, but alive and profoundly accurate. These twin movements, one scientific and one cultural, are proving that the old stories are reservoirs of hard-won empirical wisdom. They offer us a crucial alternative to a purely mechanistic universe, reminding us that the cosmos can be understood not just through equations, but through a relationship built on observation and reverence. This reconciliation is weaving a richer, more complete human story in the stars, a narrative that now expands beyond our solar system to the thousands of exoplanets being discovered. We are learning to listen to the ancient voices while training our telescopes on new worlds, finding that the same human wonder that once mapped the constellations is now charting the galaxy. That ancient human urge to see a story in the stars did not disappear with the telescope. It simply found a new canvas. Our modern myths now play out on the silver screen, where science fiction uses entire galaxies as its stage. Films like Star Wars are not so different from the Epic of Gilgamesh. They are tales of heroes and villains, of quests for identity and struggles against overwhelming forces, but set against a backdrop of nebulae and alien worlds instead of a Mesopotamian plain. These cinematic universes fulfill the same deep need as the constellation of Orion once did. They give us a framework to explore the biggest questions about who we are, all projected onto a cosmic scale. This narrative thread connects directly to our real-life voyages into the void. When humanity prepared to take its first steps on another world, we did not send a nameless rocket. We launched the Apollo program, named for the Greek god of the sun and light, a divine patron for a journey to the brilliant, airless moon. Decades later, as we plan to return and venture onward to Mars, the mission bears the name Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, the goddess of the hunt and the wilderness. Our most advanced robotic explorers continue this tradition. The Cassini spacecraft that revealed the secrets of Saturn was named for an astronomer who discovered the planet's rings, a figure now immortalized in the heavens he studied. Every time a new rover lands on Mars or a probe flies past Pluto, we are not just collecting data, we are actively writing a new chapter in the oldest story we know, the human saga of exploration. The most profound chapter we are currently writing involves the search for exoplanets, worlds orbiting distant suns. The Kepler and James Webb telescopes are not merely machines, they are the modern equivalents of the Babylonian Amun priests gazing from their ziggurats, scanning the heavens for signs and portents. Each new planet discovered in a star's habitable zone is a modern omen, a celestial message that life might be possible elsewhere. This search for a pale blue dot in another solar system is the ultimate expression of an ancient question, one that every culture who ever looked up has asked in their own way. Are we a singular miracle, or is the universe teeming with other stories waiting to be told? Our stage has expanded from a flat Earth under a dome of fixed stars to an expanding universe of 100 billion galaxies. But the story we are trying to tell remains essentially the same, a story about our own place in the grand, mysterious scheme of it all. Our search for new worlds is quietly reviving the oldest human tradition. With thousands of exoplanets now confirmed, we are no longer just cataloging data. We are instinctively weaving new myths around these distant points of light. A star known by a sterile catalog number like K2-18 is transformed when we announce it hosts a super-Earth orbiting within its habitable zone. Suddenly, that star is no longer just a ball of plasma, it is a sun. Its planet is no longer just a gravitationally bound rock. It is a world, a place where we can imagine oceans and continents, and perhaps other eyes looking back at us. This act of naming reveals our deep need to connect. We do not designate these new systems with random letters and digits. We christen them with names drawn from ancient mythology, from beloved literature, from our shared cultural dreams. A planetary system might be named for the great telescope builder William Herschel, while its worlds bear the names of characters from Shakespeare's plays or the epic poems of Homer. We are projecting our stories outward, planting flags of narrative in the soil of worlds we may never physically touch. This instinct finds its most profound expression in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, a project that is fundamentally an act of listening for a story. SETI does not merely scan for random signals, it listens for a pattern, for a structure, for a message that carries intention and meaning. It is the ultimate hope of finding another voice in the cosmic dark, another civilization that also looked up at its night sky and saw not just physics but a poem. In our age of powerful telescopes and hard data, this persistent need for wonder is more telling than any single discovery. The cold equations of orbital mechanics have not erased our longing for connection to something vast and meaningful. When we feel small and insignificant under the canopy of an infinite universe, that very feeling is its own form of perspective, a humbling reminder that we are part of an epic far grander than our daily lives. The stories our ancestors saw in Orion and the Milky Way were never just about the stars themselves, they were about us. And as we point our instruments toward planets circling distant suns, we are continuing that very same unbroken tradition, writing the newest chapter in humanity's eternal celestial storybook with every world we find. Our journey through these celestial stories reveals a universal human instinct, a deep need to find our own reflection in the vastness above. Whether it was the Egyptians using the stars to predict the life-giving flood of the Nile, or the Aboriginal Australians navigating by the songlines that wove the land and sky into one, every culture projected its deepest questions onto the cosmos. They asked why we are here, what happens when we die, and what forces govern our world, and they found the answers written in the constellations. These were not just myths, they were the foundational frameworks for entire societies, providing a shared sense of order, purpose, and identity. They connected a farmer in Mesopotamia to a navigator in the Pacific under the same canopy of meaning, creating a bond across continents and millennia that transcended language and distance. Our modern telescopes have given us a universe of breathtaking scale and physical laws, but the dark, star-filled sky still holds the same primal power to humble and inspire us. It invites us to look beyond ourselves, so the next time you find yourself under a clear night, take a moment. Look past the familiar patterns and see them for what they truly are, the first pages of humanity's collective storybook, a testament to our endless curiosity. What new stories will we write there as we venture out to other worlds? The next chapter is ours to tell, and perhaps it starts with a simple conversation. What story do the stars tell you? Share your thoughts below.